Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, Nigerian demonstrators who attend the so-called hunger protests say that they have had their fill of the government. At least 3 are killed in Kaduna State as rallies, big and small, are held across the country. Also, creating beauty from brutality. Sudanese artists from a bouquet of mediums and practices come together in Nairobi, Kenya, to shed light on the conflict that has torn their country asunder since last April. And I'm joined by Senegalese table tennis Olympian Ibrahima Diaw, asking him about his unique trajectory around the globe in pursuit of excellence for his sport of choice, and talking to him about his hope for the evolution of athletics training on the African continent. But first, Nigerians are feeling the squeeze of across-the-board price hikes, and the frustration's been growing since President Bola Tinubu took office last year. A wave of protests rolled out across the country on Thursday. Several people were reportedly killed in Kaduna in the north, and though there was a more subdued turnout in the capital of Abuja and the commercial capital of Lagos, the dissatisfaction was shared by most of those who attended the marches. Clem Vala tells us more.
At least 3 people were killed on Thursday as thousands rallied across Nigeria in protest against the nation's worst economic crisis in a generation. Crowds faced off against heavily armed security personnel and tear gas. The country is struggling with a devalued naira and soaring inflation, with food costs up by 40% and fuel prices tripled from a year ago.
We are tired of being hungry. We cannot even feed our children. We cannot buy tomato and pepper. The poor cannot survive.
These people are the ones rooting our government, draining their children abroad, spoiling the education for Nigeria. So what is the end? We want them to go.
Recent demonstrations in Kenya sparked online calls for similar protests in Nigeria. And the hashtag End Bad Governance in Nigeria has been trending online since mid-July. Protest leaders called for 10 days of marches from August 1st and have outlined a list of 19 demands. At the heart of their grievances, President Tinubu's economic reforms launched a year ago, specifically the removal of a costly state subsidy on petroleum products.
As an individual, the success of this protest will mean that the government is bringing back the subsidy regime. It will mean that automatically price of foodstuff and materials in the markets will crash down instantly. That's if the government acceds to our demands.
In the days leading up to the protest, authorities tried to deter activists from taking part in the demonstrations. They threatened to crack down on the rallies to prevent violence and claimed that Islamic State insurgents had infiltrated the protests in Kaduna.
Well, staying with Nigeria, at least 19 people died in a reported suicide bombing that targeted a tea house in Borno in the northeast. It's one of the deadliest recent attacks there, but no one has yet claimed responsibility for the blast. Our Samuel Okoye talks us through.
The attack occurred at a crowded tea shop in Kauri village, Borno State, where an explosive device was detonated. The police say 16 people were killed, but eyewitnesses say there were at least 19 dead. Many other persons were critically injured, and they have been admitted to government hospitals across the state. The government has responded by declaring a 24-hour curfew in the state. The attack has left the people in fear.
We need security to be improved, especially during this rainy season, so that people can go out and farm. We pray that God, in His infinite mercy and wisdom, restores peace to our land.
The people of Borno State have every reason to be afraid. It is the second time that so many people have been killed in a bomb attack in the state within a month. The 2 attacks coming so closely is an indication of how vulnerable the people are and the inability of the government to protect them. During the earlier incident, at least 32 people were killed, while 48 others were injured when 3 suicide bombers attacked various locations in Goza town. The jihadist group Boko Haram is suspected to have carried out both attacks, which are the worst since 2014, when the group halted a bombing campaign in many Nigerian cities. It is unclear if the group has chosen to resume the spate of bomb attacks.
Sam Olakoya there for us in Lagos. Now, Ghana is a step closer to having more women participating at the highest level of every aspect of society. MPs have this week passed a bill that sets a target to increase women's numbers to at least 30% by 2030 in Parliament. Now, it's a process that's been in the pipeline for over 25 years, as Justice Baidu tells us.
The Affirmative Action Gender Equality Bill has been in and out of Parliament since 1998. Amongst other ambitious targets, it seeks to bring the representation of women in government to 30% at least by 2030. Ghana is one of the countries with the least representation for women in its governance, with less than 15% of its current parliament being women.
It's a bill for all of us. It's a bill for development. This is the first stage. We have passed the law. We have to appropriate adequate resources for the ministry to lead the implementation of the provisions that we have enacted.
The passage of the bill is being celebrated by leading gender activists across the country as a big win in what is one of the leading democracies in Africa. It is expected to address imbalances in socio-cultural, gender and economic dynamics in everyday living to help give women a livelihood and a voice in the society.
I hope that members will commit themselves to the constitutional reforms. We need to do more there to be able to create this free and just society we are looking for, to liberate more of our women, to be able to support us, to be able to develop Mother Ghana.
The bill comes into effect after it's been signed off by the president.
Justice Baidu there in Accra. Now, parts of Morocco are experiencing excruciating heat. Temperatures have topped 48 degrees and aren't likely to drop much below that this week. The heat wave has officially caused at least 21 deaths, but the true number of heat-related fatalities is likely to be far higher. Our team reports.
Beni Mellel is feeling the heat more than ever. Despite being used to high temperatures, residents of the city have been struggling since last week. Morocco is facing its sixth straight year of drought. Water, crops and animals are in danger as temperatures spike over 48 degrees Celsius. Locals are worried.
We notice that when there's less rain, the temperature increases. There's been drought and a lack of rain in the past 5 years.
When I'm not working, I try not to go out and I keep the windows shut to block out the heat. Or I stick to air-conditioned places like cafes. But I have a problem at night because the heat remains, so I don't sleep well. My sleep quality decreases and I suffer from insomnia.
The Ministry of Health has set up special shifts in hospitals, clinics and pharmacies in the hottest regions. With good reason, at least 21 people died in Beni Mellel because of the heat wave last week.
The main cause of death is hypovolemic shock and cardiogenic shock. This means that people exposed to high temperatures experience excessive sweating, leading to a significant loss of water, decreased blood volume, and thus decreased perfusion.
The situation is directly linked to climate change. Scientists expect Morocco will face increasingly severe droughts in the near future.
Well, Southern Africa is also struggling with extreme heat. The UN's warned that a record drought across the region's devastated crops and caused millions to go hungry. At least 5 countries have had to declare a national disaster, and the World Food Programme fears that the dry spell is just set to get worse. Our correspondent in Zimbabwe tells us more.
Communities in Southern Africa are bracing themselves for more food shortages following a drought that led to widespread crop failure. In Zimbabwe, I spoke to villagers in the southern part of the country who say they did not harvest enough to last them the year. They are depending on donors for survival.
It is tough these days. It did not rain, so things are tough. We are surviving on doing menial jobs.
The World Food Programme says it needs nearly 400 million to feed the hungry in 7 different nations.
The situation in Southern Africa is quite dire. There are approximately 27 million people that have been affected by the drought as I speak. Now, I can't remember of a time when we've had such a widespread and very deep hunger situation. It is, 7 countries of concern. 5 of those countries have declared drought a national disaster.
While humanitarian organizations camp for resources to feed the hungry across the region, the United Nations says there is need for more resilience to be built in communities.
Nyasha Chingono there in Harare. Now to Nairobi, Kenya, where an exhibition of the work of Sudanese refugee artists is keeping the spotlight on the brutal 15-month conflict that has devastated their homeland. The creatives have used painting, photography, filmmaking and design to share insight into their experience of conflict and their fragile hopes for peace. Olivia Bizo went along for a look.
When the war broke out in Sudan, a lot of artists were forced to abandon their paintbrushes, their musical instruments and their studios, and many of them made their way here, to Kenya, where they're using their skills to raise awareness about the situation back home. Some of those who fled joined a residency called The Rest, where artists in exile have been able to live, work and find a sense of community. This exhibition that you can see behind me is the result of 6 months of work by artists who've been a part of that residency.
It's good, the 6 months, because we started, all of us, in a kind of, we are coming from that shock. We are trying to cope, and we started, that support give us the space, the colors, the way to express ourselves. We had many programs within that, so as to talk like psychological support, like having a kind of discussion and gathering of different ways of art.
We react to emotions more than we react to facts. And art just brings that element of connecting through visuals, through sound. That's like another level of connections that the news wouldn't provide.
The exhibition is calling for peace and for both warring sides to put down their arms. The civil war between the army and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces broke out in April of last year, and since then, tens of thousands of people have been killed and more than 10 million people have been displaced. The UN has called the war in Sudan the world's worst humanitarian crisis.
Liv Bizo there for us in Nairobi. And now Eye on Africa turns its eye onto some of the Africa-specific Olympic action happening here in Paris. So earlier on Thursday night, South African swimming powerhouse Tatiana Smith took silver in the 200 metres breaststroke, just sneaking in behind the US's Kate Douglas. Smith has added Thursday's medal to her collection just days after having successfully gone for gold in the 100 metres breaststroke. And now for a look at the evolution of African athletics training is a table tennis 2-time Olympian who's represented Senegal in this year's tournament. Ibrahima Diaw has a pretty impressive performance record for his sport. He's medalled twice in the African Championships, also taken a spot on the podium in the African Games and African Cup, and he made it to the second round here in Paris. Ibra, thanks so much for making the time to come in. First of all, congratulations on making it this far.
Thank you.
First of all, so you've got a really interesting background. You know, you've a really global overlook because you grew up here in Paris. You're representing Senegal because that's where your dad's from. So when you're here in the city of your birth, looking at the Olympic Games, do you ever feel any kind of conflict as to who you're backing?
I mean, I know where I stand. I know that, of course, I'm French and I did my education and my training here, but I'm really proud, to represent Senegal and, try to show that in Senegal we have great athletes and, and we have a future there. There's the Youth Olympic Games soon in Senegal, so it's great to show what our country can do.
And when it comes to your approach to your personal training, now, I haven't given the full story, so grew up in Paris, represent Senegal. You now live in Denmark after having spent some time in Sweden. How does this really international approach inform your approach to getting yourself game ready?
I mean, it gives me a little bit of experience and also a point of view from, the French way to do the things and the Swedish way and the Danish way, and I just take everything, and mix everything up and take the best of each country and its values, and then this create the person that I am today.
And has any of this translated into, has any of this informed your contribution to the evolution of table tennis. My bad. The evolution of table tennis in Senegal, which you're representing now?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the goal is to try to professionalize the sport in Senegal, and this is my job, and I really love it. I live from table tennis, and for me, it's like to show that there's also another path other than football or wrestling that's very popular in Senegal. So that's, for me, that's the goal, and to show a new way from the young Senegalese is my dream.
And so when you say professionalize the sport, what does that mean? What do you envisage in the kind of mid to long term as, I guess, your hopes for the evolution of Senegalese table tennis start to take root?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, being professional is just like live from the sport, and being professional is actually having a group of people that's helping you, because I'm not alone, doing the making, like, my success. I'm not alone, behind all this. I have my own trainer. I have my own physical trainer, my mental coach as well. So for me, it's just like there's a lot of group of people behind me, helping me, and also I have some sponsors also that helping me finance all my tournaments and all my expenses. So for me, my goal is just to show that, and then to put this knowledge in Senegal Federation and also Senegal athletes, and try to show them the way, Yeah.
That's super interesting. So we don't have much time, but when you're talking about having this huge team behind you, physical and the kind of psychological and mental training and support, is that not already part of the landscape for athletics training as far as you've seen it in Senegal, at least?
Yeah, I think that definitely there is definitely a clash of culture, between me and I mean, especially like not me, but nationals athletes, and the African countries, there's a little bit of clash, because we want to bring a professional mindset there, and sometimes it can be very difficult for them to understand that we actually want to improve the sport in our country, and I think that there is great athletes in Senegal, and I believe that there is a lot of improvement to do there.
Well, thank you so much for giving us a bit of an insight into some of your hopes for athletics training in Senegal. We wish you the very best of luck on your future career, Iba. Thanks for coming in to speak to us. Thank you very much for staying with us for Eye on Africa. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for. Join us again if you can. Till then, take care.